Hello, and welcome to As It Comes, Life from a Musician's Point of View. I'm Davina, I'm a freelance cellist based in London, and I had one of those moments where I saw a cellist at my home train station that I didn't know. Oh my God! She looked like your typical gigging musician, dressed in black, cello on her back, cabin-sized suitcase probably full of gig music pads, an expression of weariness on her face. It's like looking in a mirror. No, but she reminded me of myself so much, and I wanted very much to talk to her and introduce myself, but I didn't have my cello this time, so I felt like I couldn't. But then I felt even more awkward because I proceeded to stare at her for an uncomfortably long amount of time, just thinking, who are you? Should I know you? We probably know all the same people. And remember, to her, there is no indication at all that I am a cellist. To her, I'm just some crazy lady who is staring at her for no good reason. It's easier when you do have your instrument with you, and when you run into another of your kind, say on the tube, you exchange the little head nod and a smile or a of solidarity as you experience the same carnage of being out in public with your cello simultaneously. But when you don't have your instrument, you run the risk of looking a bit creepy, or being too much, because, God forbid, how dare you strike up conversation with a stranger on London public transport? My sister was in town last week for a work trip, all the way from Auckland. She's not a musician, but she told me that she smiles at cellists now when she sees them. I feel like I'm once removed. And that's nice, isn't it? If you're a cellist and you're on the receiving end of a nice warm smile, that's much more preferable to the open-mouthed gawp. So I'm going to encourage that. A brief smile, then move on. Do not maintain eye contact for too long, or else you'll look weird. So, today's guest is Nina Harries. She's a double bass player and vocalist. She does both at the same time. A multitasker of the highest degree who has this down to a fine art. She's played with several bands, the Akram Khan Dance Company, and she's got an album of her own original material coming up. We chat about having a musical family, imposter syndrome, insight into band life, how you tour with a double bass, and of course, her new album. I was so thankful to chat to Nina. She drove 1.5 hours to my flat in South London to come and have our conversation. What a champ. In true British style, we chat over cups of tea. So have a listen to my chat with Nina. Have a sip of your Lady Grey tea.
Oh, it's nice, isn't it? I haven't had this one in ages.
I don't think I've ever had a Lady Grey tea.
It's Earl Grey, but it's got like citrus, like an orange vibe.
Less bergamot or whatever.
Oh, whatever.
That's the characteristic of Earl Grey, isn't it?
Yeah. But I'm never sure whether it's bergamot or bergamot.
Yeah.
I've never known that. We should. I don't even know where that word comes from.
The silent T, like at the end of Merlot.
That's what I imagine.
Bergamot.
Who knows? Bergamot doesn't sound very sensuous, does it?
Burger M-O-T. Like. Nina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Do you want to start off by telling us what you've been up to over the summer?
This summer's been a bit of a different one for me. Usually in the past I would be doing a horrendously long festival season, but this year I tried to not do that, to give myself a bit of free time. So I think we only did 3 festivals in the end. We did Glastonbury, 2 independent festivals, one in Oxfordshire called Roll Right Fair and one in Somerset called Fanny's Meadow. Best festival ever. Other than that, I've just been trying to knuckle down and prepare for the upcoming months of work.
Yeah, the impending doom. I love how you just said, oh, we just did 3 festivals, and the first one you name is one of the biggest festivals in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, just a little festival you might have heard of.
Oh, well, yeah, it's an experience, Glastonbury. This year I did it a bit differently. I decided that I wasn't going to do it as a musician. I was going to do it working. So I ended up working with a friend of mine who runs a lot of the bars in Glastonbury, and we were doing like a backstage bar called Pinky's.
Do you generally enjoy festivals?
No, not really. I mean, there are amazing moments in festivals, like the sunrises when you catch them, and some of the gigs can be amazing, but in general, as a double bass player, festivals are quite harrowing, especially the big ones, because you end up just carrying your instrument from field to field. And I didn't have to do that this year, but at Glastonbury a couple of years ago, we ended up having I think we had 9 gigs in 3 days, and I had to carry the bass from opposite sides of the festival 2 or 3 times a day, and it was just horrible.
And probably through the mud, right?
Oh yeah, because that year, it was 3 years ago, I think, and the mud was like record levels. So
was that 2016?
I thought it might have been.
That was the year I was there. It was very muddy.
Yeah, it was horrendous.
So thankful for wellies, actually. I was performing as part of a group that had to wear all white.
Oh God, that's just asking for it, isn't it? Why would you do that to people at a festival? Like,
I mean, it was a miracle that I didn't get soiled in any way. It is impractical for that sort of an environment.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I think festivals are amazing places, but there is a lot of other baggage that goes along.
Oh yeah, literally.
It's like when Glastonbury finishes and you can basically see trails of mud from Somerset all the way to Victoria Station.
All the way up the A303, muddy footprints.
Yeah, totally. A little introduction for listeners who may not know you. You're a double bass player and a vocalist, writing your own original material that explores the relationship between the double bass and the female voice.
That's the one.
How would you sum that up?
It's always changing all the time, because originally I was doing it more in a solo context. I still do that, but now it's starting to change, it's starting to grow a bit. So before, when I was writing the original music, it was very much to do with that relationship between those two sound worlds, and the way that when you play and sing simultaneously, the different pathways that kind of open up in your brain. But it's definitely changing now, because I've started working with a band and rearranging the music that I wrote originally for a soloist. Well, all the roles have changed now. The bass actually becomes a bass instrument again.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, which is quite it's quite a minefield for me. I have to rethink how to play my instrument again.
So we'll get into a little bit about your solo album in a bit. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into this path of playing and singing? You've got a really musical family. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you started exploring this?
I always wanted to perform solo in some context, and the idea of a classical soloist didn't really exist to me at this point, because we're talking like before I went to the RCM. So when I was still in my hometown, I started getting into bands and the idea of singer-songwriters and this sort of thing. This was just as I was starting to play the double bass, but I was terrible. So that didn't seem an option to me at the time. So what I tried to do was learn guitar. And I'd always sung since I was little, because my mum is a singer as well, and I grew up doing choirs, and I was always a part of as much singing background as I could do, like church choirs and non-secular choirs and all sorts of stuff. I got really into like Lou Reed and Bob Dylan and that sort of, the man with the guitar. So I thought, I'll give it a go. And I did a gig on guitar, and I think I did mostly Bob Dylan covers actually in the Labour Club back in Northampton, which that was my first hang. I quickly realised that A, I didn't have any real ability on the guitar, and B, I'm quite a contrary person. I don't like to do things that are too obvious or done too much. I like getting away from people's expectations, and I realised very quickly that the kind of trope of the singer with the guitar is just everywhere you look, that exists.
So you became the lady with the double bass.
Yeah, well, I thought to myself, how can I change this? How can I change this trope to fit me, to be something a bit more rare, I guess, and do something different? And at this point, I thought I was starting to get a hang of how to play the double bass, kind of nearly almost. I thought, hey, you know what? I've never seen anyone play double bass and sing before. But as you said about my family, I grew up watching my dad play double bass. So that was always something that I wanted to try. And then it just kind of started working very slowly. I think I wrote one song, on the double bass, and people seemed to respond to it. Back then, I can't imagine what it must have sounded like, because wow.
Well, I think that's the funny thing, is sometimes we get surprised when you get a positive response out of some kind of creative output. But I think the fact that you've done something in the first place is impressive, compared to all those people who are sitting there being like, oh, wow, this is a new thing. And it's like, well, they haven't done anything. So,
yeah, I think definitely just seeing something that they've not seen before. And the double bass has that ability to surprise people without even playing it, just the look of it, the sight of it. Yeah, people can't believe that it's a thing. And I mean, honestly, neither can I. So I think seeing it on its own on a stage, it's something that grabs people's attention before you've even started playing.
And if not that, it's just, of course, people are going to be impressed that you've come all this way with this massive double bass on stage, and you've gone up all these stairs and navigated through the muddy fields of Glastonbury. I'm really interested in musical families, actually, because I don't really come from a musical family. I come from a family of music appreciators. What was it like for you living in that environment where, as you mentioned, your dad plays the double bass and your siblings?
Yeah, both musical.
Was there a lot of collaboration during your childhood, or did you feel free to pursue your own ideas?
I always get people ask me that, like, oh, so you must have done the family band thing. But for most of my life, no, we never did that, because everyone's kind of from different not musical backgrounds, because we're obviously all the same family, but we all do music in very different ways. My sister originally was a classical bassoonist, playing in orchestras, and my brother is completely self-taught guitar, drums, singer, and approaches music in a completely different way to my sister and I, because we're classically trained. And then my dad is an incredibly versatile musician, again, plays for all sorts of different acts, classical and non-classical. My mum is into music education, so she's coming at music from a very different angle. But we never did the family band thing until, I think it was 2017. My sister got married and she asked my dad, my brother and I to be the band. I think my dad and my brother had played together a few times with the Hoffestschecter dance company. So they'd worked together, but never as like a family thing. They were both just on the same show. But then my sister said, yeah, I'd love you guys to be the band. And here's the list of songs that we want played. And we had some rehearsals in our house, and I think that was the first time the three of us played together. We're going to do it again for my stuff.
That's really cool. And I imagine, as you said, you all do music in different ways, and the more you do collaborate with each other, the more it sort of informs each other's playing,
definitely.
Knowing how each other's brains work. And I think
that's the whole thing.
That can be really useful sometimes, because I'm classically trained and I'll be in a position where I'm working with someone who's not classically trained, and you have to translate things a little bit in your head.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Moving on, you went on to study at the Royal College of Music.
Yeah.
As you mentioned.
Kind of. Yeah.
Kind of. So you ended up there. There's a quote on your website which struck a chord with me, where you state you felt a bit below standard there. And I think a lot of students have this fixed idea of what they want to or feel they should achieve at college, which works for some, but obviously not for everybody. And it can be really detrimental to the health of many students just to have this kind of preconceived notion of what we must do at music college. So what made you pursue your own path, going to a very conventional, music conservatoire environment? And what made you stray away from the Western classical way of playing?
It was a huge journey, those 4 years. My brother keeps insisting that the next record we do has to be called 4 years, because he believes that those are 4 years that I wasted. But that's just him. I don't think that I think some of it was useful. From arriving, I immediately felt a sense of, my mum calls it imposter syndrome.
Oh, sure, totally.
Mostly because I think when I first arrived, everybody knew each other. And that shocked me,
really?
Because I was expecting everyone to be in the same boat as me, to be quite scared, to be quite lonely, to be quite... Ugh. But then I discovered about this thing, the fact that there are music schools, not rather than conservatoires.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Because I didn't know about that. So someone came up to me, I remember like the first day, and they were like, so did you go to Purcell?
Oh.
My first thought, which I said, very embarrassing, was, how do you go to Purcell? Because I always just thought that was a composer. And I think I pretty much outed myself from that moment as a bit of an imposter.
Go to Purcell, do not pass go.
Yeah, like how do you go to Purcell? Like,
do not collect £200.
Yeah, definitely do not collect 200. Please give £60,000. From the first moment, I felt quite out of place, and the music that I had done in Northampton, I'd played with the Northamptonshire County Youth Orchestra. I was principal there. I was the good one. I was good, I thought. So I think going from that to the real classical thing, I felt like, oh God, I don't know anything about this stuff, and everyone seems to know a lot already. And I'm kind of not self-taught. I had a lot of lessons with an amazing bass teacher, Peter Smith, in Northampton, but I was still very much a kind of ear musician. That's how my mum refers to it.
A what musician?
An ear musician. This is a theory that we have. There's two types of musician. There's the ear musician and the eye musician. So ear musician is a natural. Yeah, ear. Yeah. What were you thinking? What did you think I was saying?
I don't know.
Ear.
As in like the organ with which you listen.
Yeah, that's the one. There's two ones on the side of your head.
I get it now.
But that idea of the musician, that kind of functions very much from how they hear things. So they don't necessarily have like a detailed academic understanding of music, but you find that they don't need it.
Yeah.
Because their ears are so developed that the ability to read music, or even the ability to kind of name the notes in a chord, they don't need that because they'll play it without even thinking.
Yeah.
Whereas then there's the other side where people very much study it in an academic sense. And I thought I was an academic until I came to the college, and then I realized that I was essentially a pop musician there. There was some classical music that I liked to listen to, but it wasn't a habitual thing for me. It was always very much like rock music, old rock as well, like the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, who I said before, David Bowie, that kind of background. So as soon as I arrived, I was like, oh, do you like David Bowie? And they just look at you like, who's that? And they're like, oh Christ, I'm definitely in the wrong place. I try not to sound like I'm being disparaging about classical musicians, because there's something about them that I respect so much and I envy so much, which is their undying dedication to the art of self-improvement.
Yeah.
That is something that I never experienced before. I mean, my teacher back in Northampton would be like, can you just practice? And I'd be like, yeah, cool. I do like half an hour a week. It never really crossed my mind. And then you come into college and everything is about practice. It's just like every day, the only conversation that you hear from people is like, oh, I've done this many hours of practice today and I'm going to do this many hours again tonight. It blew my mind, because I still, even today, playing the double bass is incredibly physical, and if I play for half an hour I need to lie down afterwards, because it's just so tiring. And these people played for hours every day, and it was all in view of this improving their technique and getting better and learning the repertoire and just improving. And that's an incredible attitude, and I appreciated it so much, and I'll never be like that. I had to accept it kind of early on, that I don't have that, whatever that is. Like, I want to improve and I'll do the work. I'll do work when I feel like I need to, but I don't have that same drive. Mm-hmm. And upon kind of seeing it every day and realizing that I didn't really have that vibe, that was quite hard. That made me feel like I didn't really deserve to be there because I didn't work as hard as the others. Now I see that I was kind of working in a different way. I was actually working, for one. I was going and doing gigs almost every weekend, sometimes all week, every week, just to earn some money and to meet other musicians. And it was all kind of I did some function stuff. I started doing solo gigs in my second year. I started playing with a few bands, one of which I met the drummer at the Royal College, and she asked me to join their band, The Burning Glass. Check them out, best band ever. It was kind of hard to realize that I didn't have their drive, and that made me feel even more like it didn't really deserve to be there.
It's sort of, as I mentioned before, detrimental to musicians' health on both sides, isn't it? It's like kind of on your side thinking, oh, I shouldn't be here, but then also those people who are so focused on, as you say, focusing on
and they don't do anything else.
One thing. And
you ask them, like, do you want to go to this gig? And they're like, oh, I can't, I've got to practice. And there's this, like, you see it in their eyes, it's like this kind of panic, fear panic. And I think it very much depends on people's situation. Like, some people, maybe they have quite pushy families. I think some people have very pushy teachers, which can work, but can also be really damaging to someone's self-esteem. I've been incredibly lucky. I think the only reason I stayed at college was from my second year, I got the most amazing teacher I could have imagined, who didn't see me as a layabout. Mm-hmm. He thought I was worth something. He knew I shouldn't really have been there, but he appreciated that I was trying to be there. So.
And that you could pursue your own path. I think ultimately you want that in a teacher, someone who will let you bloom.
Definitely. And even if it's not the direction that they themselves specialise in, because obviously when you're at college, you're very much focused on classical repertoire and with the intention to end up in an orchestra. That's either a soloist or an orchestral player, isn't it, really? Those are the two jobs. And I think my teacher very early on, and myself, realised that wasn't ever going to be a thing for me, mostly because I probably didn't have the right skill, but also I was too interested in the other things, the other sides of music that I could see kind of in my peripheral, and that I knew like they were doing it in like that underground scene that didn't exist at the college. And I was just like, there's something else that I think I should probably go and do that. And he encouraged me to do that. He even came to my first gig, I remember.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
How did you find your way through those 4 years? Tough?
I nearly left loads of times. I think almost every week I probably called my mum and was like, I don't need to. But yeah, I think, to be honest, my teacher, Enno Senf, had a huge impact on me, and he is the reason I stayed. Because I remember I didn't do particularly well in the recital aspect because A, I didn't practice enough, and B, I got horrific nerves. Mm-hmm. None of the repertoire really suited me because I knew I was kind of meant to be doing... I couldn't make that classical stuff sound good, you know, and I could hear the other people around me doing it, and I was like, wow, no, I know I don't sound like that.
Yeah.
But Enno encouraged me to try contemporary music, which just changed everything for me because I realised I could do it. It was amazing. Like, I can't play these classical concertos, but put a piece of like 20th century music in front of me and I'm like, oh, I can do that. Like, no matter how ridiculous those rhythms are that they do in the weird extended techniques, I love that. It works for me. So.
I think that's what I find quite freeing about modern music and contemporary music is that you have the opportunity to make it your own.
Definitely.
Don't you? There are none of these preconceived notions of this is what it should sound like authentically.
Yeah,
which a lot of people get really hung up about. But if it's a new piece, and if you're the first person playing it, then you can sort of...
No one will know.
Yeah, you just do whatever you like.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Sometimes the composer won't even know.
That's the future, really. And I knew as soon as I started doing contemporary music, I realised, I was like, okay, so in the classical world, there may only be one part where I could work, and it will be in contemporary music. Like my teacher, he played for the London Sinfonietta. I started doing, I think it was my third year, I started doing the module where you can choose to work with the composers who are studying at the college too.
Yeah.
I think they call it contemporary music in action or something cool like that. Yeah, CMIA and YMCA. And I agreed to take on 3 composers because you're only supposed to do one. But I was like, this is the future because people can write me pieces that will fit me, that I can actually do. And I asked them all to do it for double bass and voice.
You can have that active role and collaboration.
Yeah, and you can actually show them what you believe your instrument can do rather than them kind of being in a room on their own and being like, I don't actually play the double bass.
Or like consulting some orchestration book and being like, I don't really know how that works.
Or you're on Sibelius and you get this score and it's got like 9 ledger lines below the stave and you're like, the double bass only has 1 ledger line below the stave and that's the open bottom string. So like there's nothing under there. Like I can't do any of these.
Yeah,
like,
I think when those notes start turning red on the computer.
Oh God, that's the message, people. When it goes red on Sibelius, stop and call your local double bass player and ask them how many notes they can actually play.
It's always better to talk to a person, right?
Definitely. Red alert.
Yeah, like literally, actually. So since leaving college, woohoo, you made it out the other end, the 4 years. Your music has led you all around the world and all around the place. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you've been up to since you left college?
When I first left college, I was playing for about 4 or 5 bands at the same time. So I don't know how I managed it because I think any musician listening now can agree that like basically the first job you ever do is teaching. But I was always kind of really scared of teaching because I know I have very bad habits and I don't want to give them to another person. Like the double bass and I have a whole journey to complete before I can tell anyone else how to play it.
You feel very responsible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just like trying to hold the string down, you know.
I'm sure you know a lot more than
I did then, definitely. But yeah, so I shunned the concept of teaching completely, and I was playing for about 4 or 5 bands, like I said. This is when we used to do the festivals, so I'd do 25 festivals in a row. You know, I'd just be in my van constantly, driving, doing 3 sets with 1 band or 2 sets with 2 bands.
So the 3 that you mentioned at the beginning, you're like only 3.
Yeah, now it makes sense because
that was compared to 25.
Yeah, that was the worst year, I think, was the 25 in a row. That was with 5 acts and playing solo as well. That was how I made a living, essentially, the festival season. And it's the same for a lot of bands working today. The festival season is really your chance to, if not make money, because obviously they're not always that well paid, but to reach new audiences, to extend your fan base or whatever. I was doing a lot of festivals and then my whole life changed. My brother got an email from a composer that he worked with the Hoffe Schechter company. I mentioned earlier, a dance company. The composer who used to work for the Schechter company messaged my brother just offhand one day being like, I'm trying to put together an ensemble for a new dance piece and I need a double bassist who does Indian music or who has some kind of knowledge of Indian music. And my brother was like, oh God, I'm a guitarist. I don't know what you want. But my sister really likes Indian music, and I did. I've always, like, my mum brought me up listening to Ravi Shankar like every day. Oh, cool. So I've always had a bit of I wouldn't call it an obsession because I don't know enough about it to be obsessed with it, but
imagine
definite
if you are
passion.
an ear musician, as you said, and you've been listening to it your entire life, you've probably absorbed a lot of that.
I'd like to think so. I mean, the more I do it, the less I realise I know. And my brother just said to this guy, he was like, yeah, well, my sister's very interested and she's just come out of college, so I can send you a video of hers. And the guy was Vincenzo Lamagna. He was like, yeah, okay, send me a video. My brother sent him 2 videos, I think, just of songs of mine from YouTube. And the next day I get a phone call from this guy, Vince, and he wants to meet me to talk about a show with a dancer called Akram Khan. And at the time I didn't know any of these names. You know, I vaguely recognized Vince because I'd seen the show Hoffa Schechter did that they worked on, but I didn't know about the glorious Akram Khan, our glorious leader. I went to meet Vince and we had a talk about very vague ideas that he had for what this show was going to be, but he wanted a very small ensemble and he was very interested in the fact that I could play and sing because I was basically 2 birds with 1 stone. He gave me a very small background of Akram, but I didn't really understand what it was I was getting myself into. And then I had a phone call from the Akram Khan and I went to meet him at the Sadler's Wells Cafe, which I was quaking in my boots, you know, because I knew this was going to be my first job, like the real job. And I had no idea what to expect. And then, so I met with Akram and we talked a little bit more about the show. And I just had the job, which is a thing that the classical schools, they really groom you for this thing called the audition.
Yeah.
Which fair dues, because most orchestras operate on an audition process, you know, and you have to learn this repertoire and then you have to go into the scary room with the scary men behind the scary table and you have to play this concerto that you'll never play live and lots of scary excerpts that you will play live, so don't get complacent. So you're really waiting for that. You're waiting for the audition. And I was waiting for the audition for this thing, you know, and it never came. I'd done a YouTube audition without knowing it.
And then all of a sudden, did you feel like, oh, here's my imposter syndrome again?
Yeah, well, I was really scared because I had no idea. I mean, I'd seen my brother and my dad doing dance shows before, but this one was so different. Immediately I could tell because Akram, he comes from a London Bangladeshi background, so he does a form of classical Indian dance called Kathak, which is like they wear bells and it's all about the rhythm. They basically perform the Indian rhythms or the tals but with their feet, and the drum and the rhythm of it comes from the bells and their feet movements. It's an incredible dance form that I'd never heard of before, and as soon as I had my meeting with Akram, I went home and watched 100 videos of it, and I realised, wow, this is really serious. This is a proper thing, and I'm about to get involved in this, and I have no idea about.
Don't screw up. Don't screw up. Yeah,
I was really scared. They started planning what it was going to be like, and the show was going to be set in the First World War because it was sponsored by this charity 14 to 18 now, so it's like a remembrance of the First World War, and it's the story of a Bangladeshi soldier in the trenches of the First World War. The story was starting to come together, and it's all about the isolation, fighting for someone else's war, you know, because we don't know about this. In the First World War, I think it was 1.4 million soldiers from India and Bangladesh were basically shipped over to the Allied front because obviously India was under British colonial rule at that point. So they had no say. They were essentially shipped out to fight a war that they had no idea
they were British
was
subjects.
Even happening. So they had no say in what they were doing, and they were just to fight for the crown, for their masters, you know, which is horrific to think about now, but that was happening, and it wasn't even that long ago. And so this show is all about a soldier being ripped out of his homeland and put into someone else's homeland, fighting for someone else's homeland. And I think for me, the idea of being a British person and being invited to take part in that show, I can't even speak about it. It's the biggest honour I'll probably ever have. And since then, we've toured. It feels like everywhere. I know there are loads of other countries that we haven't been yet.
It looks like everywhere, I think, from what I've seen on social media.
It definitely feels like everywhere.
Somewhere different every day.
Yeah, basically. And I try not to think about my carbon footprint at all because I can't afford to offset it. Yeah, I will do. When I make some more money somehow one day, I'm going to offset the whole thing. But right now, It's
going to make it fun cutting around your bass, offsetting your carbon footprint. I have to ask the obvious question here. How do you deal with touring with a bass?
As soon as it appeared that I had the job and they sent us the schedule for the touring, I went to my dad, who's been touring for 30 years. And I just said to him, I was like, what do I do? Because we don't have a flight case. We don't own one. Do I have to rent one? It's going to be like thousands of pounds. I don't think the company are going to want to shell that out every time we fly. And he was like, there's something that you should know. It's not a kind of researched thing, but it's something that people have kind of put together. It's a 1 in 3 flights an instrument is destroyed.
Oh no.
Yeah, I know. So if you're listening, people, and if you've managed to not fall into that, well done.
Yeah,
but it will happen next time. Don't get too complacent.
But we're talking about if you put your instruments in the hold. Yeah, I mean, obviously
not just in the hold, I'm afraid, because air pressure in the cabin changing can really affect especially string instruments.
Yeah, sure.
Not sure about wind and brass. I've never really understood how any of that works.
And then also, I guess, with being on trucks as well.
Yeah, because that's the other option. We have 2 sets and they basically travel alternate locations so that we always have the set arriving, coming by a lorry.
Yeah.
And our percussionist, Manjunath, he keeps his mridangam drums. He has 2 sets of drums and one of them travels in the lorry, and he has had several things of getting them out of the lorry and the skin's smashed or the wood's tripled in size or so.
Oh, no.
Traveling with an instrument,
It's a minefield.
it's a real minefield. And with the double bass, I did it once. I went to Greece to do a wedding randomly with a couple of friends of mine, and we hired a flight case, and we ended up taking an electric double bass in a flight case for a regular double bass, which is a really stupid thing.
I'm just having an image of like this skinny little thing
Yeah,
like rattling
with all
around
the
in
spaces
a coffin.
rattling around.
Yeah.
But the reason is because it's made by Yamaha, and Yamaha, if you're listening, please make an affordable flight case for your electric double basses, because we can't fly them in those soft cases that you provide. And I know that you make one technically, but it costs about $6,000. So please, if you're listening, you can send me a free one.
Or get some competitors to make.
Yeah,
to provide some healthy competition.
If you're not Yamaha and you're listening, please make an affordable flight case for your
There's a business
EVs.
opportunity right here.
Definitely. We did that, and I remember arriving at the airport with this huge white flight case, and the air attendant guy was like, you just can't put that in that. You can't take a fridge on a plane.
A fridge?
Because it's a big white carbon fibre thing, and to be fair to him, it does look a little bit like a fridge, and that has stuck with me ever since that happened. So when I started talking to the AKC, the Akram Khan company, about the logistics of flying, I said, look, I don't want to take my instrument anywhere, so let's just rent, because that's what people do.
Sure.
So we rent in every location that we go to, and it's been a harrowing journey.
So does that mean you get to play a different instrument every time?
Yep, every location we do, I play a different bass.
You're always getting used to a new instrument. It's like being a pianist, isn't it?
It is, and I used to be quite disparaging about pianists and be like, oh, well, it's all the same, isn't it? All the keys are the same, but I now understand that
Every instrument is
every
totally
instrument is a completely different instrument, especially with big ones, because there's a lot of I'm sure if there are any bassists listening, you know about this. Even the slightest change in a shape or a distance between 1 and 2 notes, it throws off your whole understanding of how the instrument works and your fingerings and the way that your arms move. And
it's a bigger margin for error.
Yeah, it's huge. So usually I get the double bass about 2 hours before we do our sound check. So I usually have about 2 hours to learn how to play a double bass completely perfectly every time, which doesn't happen.
So you mentioned earlier you and your family are performing together. It's part of your solo album coming out very soon.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It's taken me a long time to get round to recording something. It's obviously something you kind of have to do as a songwriter or a band.
What, write songs?
Yeah, you got to write songs. You got to do it. There's no way around it. Otherwise it gets awkward after a while. It took me years to kind of get the right idea of making an album, because it's a huge thing. I didn't really realize at the time, like before I did it, but it's a huge journey and it's a big learning curve, especially if you've never done I've done a lot of recording before, but it's always for other people or classical stuff. So it's a completely different ball game when it's your own thing. You're so emotionally involved and it's so much work. But it's happened. I did it. Well, technically I actually did it 2 years ago, but I then got the job with Akram, so I buggered off around the world for 1.5 years. So that kind of put a bit of a delay.
Put it on the back burner for a bit.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with working creatively? Because this is something I find, and with my own creative work, is you have this goal, you have this idea that you're going to put something out there, and then it comes to it, and you think, my brain is empty.
Oh God,
you know, like trying to write something. For me, it's not necessarily music, more words, say. How do you deal with looking for inspiration?
I have to say I would never have been able to do this record if it wasn't for my brother. The whole record is performed by him and I on several different instruments, and he was an an amazing inspiration to me. He's a very prolific artist. He's written quite a few of his own albums. He's an amazing songwriter, and he does library music too. He's really, I don't know, mastered the art of, it's not, he says it's not being prolific, it's just doing the work, because there's a thing about being creative that there's no one there like tapping you on the shoulder going, this has to be in by Tuesday, you know, like, so we kind of get so delayed in our mind. Well, actually, yeah, that's true. Sometimes there is, especially if you do library music. Yeah, but he was a great inspiration to me as to how to approach songwriting, how to record things so that they work on a record, because I have a very kind of free improvisatory aspect to my performance, especially solo, where every song, every time I do it, will be different. Sometimes they're almost unrecognizable. And I think definitely learning more about Indian music has definitely made that even more so, because improvisation is so important in Indian music. And I've really picked that up from working with the AKC. So my songs have got even more kind of, they drift away and they drift out, and you don't recognize them the next time you hear them. And my brother was very useful and very kind of pragmatic in that sense, that he was like, no, you know, you have to set them down and they have to work in a structure that people can hear. That, you know, it's pop music after all. When I say pop music, that's basically anything that's not classical.
Classical, yeah.
Rather than it actually being like pop music.
So he sort of laid down some boundaries.
Yeah, definitely. And he showed me how it's not necessarily making something less creative by giving it boundaries. It's just giving yourself a chance, because if you have too many choices, I get awful multi-option anxiety. So if I have too many choices or too many ideas, I can't do anything. I just sit on the sofa and cry.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or just being overwhelmed by all the different options.
Definitely.
Working within those parameters so that you can be creative, but at least you've given yourself a little bit of a brief.
Limits. You need some limits. Otherwise, there's so many things that you could do that you end up doing nothing. So my brother was a really important part of putting in those limits and giving things real structure and organizing how a song should go, you know, because there are like lots of templates, but you can't just be completely free and wild, which is how I was imagining it, you know, because it just won't make sense to a listener.
Yeah, there is a lot more structure that goes on in pop music than I think a lot of classical musicians realize.
Definitely,
like the times I've performed with pop musicians, and I just think, wow, they know everything off by heart.
Yeah.
And it's because they've got it all in their brain. They're not reading dots like I am. And that's due to the structure, the sort of boundaries that they
definitely. And there are almost as many, I would imagine that there are almost as many rules in pop music for structure and order of things than there are in classical music. But we get this thing when we go to college that we kind of get this weird disrespect almost for pop music.
I learned about my circle of fifths. Why didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. And then you realize that actually you had to learn it by reading it, whereas these guys just hear it and go, that's the circle of... They don't even need to call it the circle of fifths, because they're like, that's just music, isn't it?
That's just the thing that I know.
And then you realize you're like, oh wow, we've been looking down on you, but you should be looking down on us, man.
Well, we can learn from each other.
Yeah, definitely.
So the album is coming out. You've got an album launch on the 13th of September.
Yeah.
So that is in the future. I know people will probably be listening to this in
December.
The future. Yeah, in December.
You missed it.
Hi, future people. But for those people who are really, really keen, they can check out your album. Where can they find details about that?
Yeah, the album will be available to purchase digitally from Bandcamp, but you can also, on the same site, you can order it CD or vinyl format. Or if you know me personally, you can send me a nice message, because I think... I know not everyone's on Bandcamp, so...
Right.
But yeah, you can also find the details of it on my website, which is just ninaharries.com.
We'll post details about that. What's the name of the album?
It's just called Nina Harries because I couldn't think of anything to call it. Because when you give an album a name, it's usually one of the songs on the album.
Yep.
And I didn't want any of the songs on the album to get like extra important.
Yeah, like the single.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't done any single releases because I find that the record itself is the important thing, and there's not actually any one song. Or I think every person that listens to it will have their own song that they think was the title track.
Yeah.
So they can just imagine that, and I like that.
You can look at it more holistically.
Yeah, and apparently it's a thing that people, when it's their first album, they just call it by their name. Okay. You know, apparently that's a thing. So I just went with that.
I did tell you before that there would be some surprise questions. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I like a surprise.
Oh, do you really?
Kind of.
Yeah. So this is the wildcard question round. Where you have the opportunity to choose what I ask you next based on 3 topics that I present you. It's a surprise.
Oh, I'm so surprised.
Okay, so first of all, we have pre-gig rituals, non-musical pursuits, and we have strengths and weaknesses. I'm not choosing for you.
Yeah, I was looking at you beseeching me, but it didn't work. No one wants to know what I do other than music, I'd imagine. No one's that interested in me.
I'm interested in like the non-musical side of people.
Are you?
Because I think a lot of people, you know, they have this image of a musician. It's like, oh, music is my life. And I breathe music every single day. And I couldn't breathe without Bach.
Music isn't what I do, it's what I am.
Oh. And so I like hearing about how, you know, people just do silly things.
Let's go for that one then. Okay. Non-musical pursuits.
All right. So what are you most likely to be doing when you're not playing or thinking about music?
I have two things, and they're kind of the opposite of each other, which I really like. I'm a big fan of hiking. I'm a massive hiker.
Oh, yes. You were recently in Wales, weren't you?
I was. I went to Wales with my aunt. She's doing, there's this thing called the County Top Challenge, where you climb the highest point of every single county in the whole of the UK.
Oh, my God.
And she's doing it for the Duke of Edinburgh Award.
DV.
That's the one. It'd be so much easier. She's doing it for the DV. Yeah. She actually coaches classes on doing the DV and like guides people through it. But she recently realized that she actually didn't have one, so she's going to do it now. Yeah. It's a bit late, but you know, she's climbed every mountain at least 5 times, so I think she's earned it. Yeah, I know. That was in my head. We went to Wales and we did the county tops of Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, because actually it turns out that our family come from that area, those two counties. So that was amazing. We went to a shop that my great-great-grandfather, Archibald Dawes, used to work there, used to be a confectioner.
Oh,
but now it's like it's like they call it a tobacconist, but it's mostly mostly sells alcohol, which
really?
It's quite tragic,
so
considering
it's like an off-license.
Yeah, that Archibald Dawes actually ended up an alcoholic in the workhouse, so I think it's kind of a sad irony there that they now sell a lot of very weird liqueurs.
And then maybe next time you go, it'll become like a vape shop or something.
Yeah, well, you know, that's every way. Yeah, everything's a vape shop nowadays.
Have you ever been up Mount Snowdon?
I haven't. That's that's one of the 3 peaks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've done Scarfell Pike, which is the
English one.
Yeah,
and then there's Ben Nevis.
And there's Ben Nevis and then Snowdon. So I haven't actually done Ben Nevis or Snowdon. We were going to do Ben Nevis this summer, but Scotland have had some quite horrific weather, so we decided it wouldn't be safe for us to do it. But those are basically the next ones that I want to try.
Mark and I actually got engaged on Mount Snowdon.
Did you? Oh my God, that's the sweetest thing I ever heard.
Well, yeah, it was a long hike.
Yeah, I can imagine. Were you just like, do you want to get married? Yeah, come on. We've got to get down. It's getting dark.
It was in the middle of summer, but it was typical, you know, Welsh summer weather, so rain jacket and wellies. Yeah.
We were very lucky this last week, actually. We had some really good weather. Yeah, some actual sun. I actually got sunburned.
What?
Amazing, isn't it?
That's incredible. Yeah. So you mentioned 2 things. What's the other thing that you do?
Sitting on the sofa.
Great.
They're the exact opposite.
So sometimes crying, sometimes not crying.
Yeah, basically. But sometimes I'm not crying on the sofa and I'm crying up a mountain. So, you know, crying is probably the number 3, actually. They're the only other thing that I do most of the time.
Are they sometimes tears of joy?
Yeah. I do find myself tearing up a lot, especially in nature. I find I have a very strong connection with nature. I think we all do, but sometimes it gets denatured somehow by our very kind of urban lives. Yeah. But I have a real passion for the outdoors, and especially climbing or hiking, as I said. So I do often find myself in tears at the top of a mountain.
You got to go to New Zealand sometime. I
really want to. Yeah. I did. We've been to Australia on tour. We never made it to New Zealand. So I did 10 days in Australia hiking on my own, and that was amazing. I did. I climbed into the Grampians, which is one of their big in South Australia, one of their big mountain ranges. So that was amazing, and I do aim to go to New Zealand at some point, especially because you have lovely horses there as well. So
you're a horse person.
Yeah, I'm a big horse.
Yeah, I feel like if you go to New Zealand, you'll probably be in tears a lot. Yeah, a lot of tears of joy.
That's good.
Yeah. Nina Harries, it's been lovely chatting to you.
Thanks for having me.
You mentioned before, people can find you on your website, which
yes,
is ninaharries.com.
That's the one.
Any social media handles we should know about?
I think they're both the same for Facebook and Instagram. It's just Nina Harries bass, because I'm not very imaginative.
Do you play the bass?
I do. That's basically the only thing that I do, really, other than hiking and crying.
Yeah, we now know you do other things.
Those are the social media things. But yeah, the album launch, 13th of September at Hoxton Hall. Sorry for people that are listening to this in December, but
future.
You should have been there. Were you there? If you weren't there, fair enough. Can't be that horrible to you. But it's going to be a thing. So if you're listening now, buy your tickets now so I don't.
and
cry anymore about
it's going to be
ticket
amazing.
sales.
And you can watch Nina sing
It will
and
be a
play and collaborate with her family.
Yeah, you get to see it's a rare thing. The Harries family on stage all together.
You're witnessing history. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Bye.
That was Nina Harries. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. Sorry, Nina, I didn't get your pronunciation of ear straight away. Not your fault. Clearly, my ears were not working in some way that day. If you're listening to this episode promptly when it comes out, check out tickets to her album launch on September the 13th, a link to which I'll post in the show notes. And if you're listening to this in the future, hi! How's the future? Are we living in some sort of post-Brexit apocalypse? Oh God, I hope not. Am I still alive even? My voice has been immortalized through these podcasts. This week's Music College Didn't Prepare Me comes in the form of a conversation I had with my friend Lisa. I have to do it in her voice. No prizes for guessing where she's from. I reckon Music College should have a series of continued professional development courses in lots of different subjects. But one thing Music College doesn't teach you and should is how to pose for a fucking photo. Sorry, Lisa. I then proceeded to laugh out very loud into my glass of weird and frankly quite gross English sparkling wine that we'd been given for free after a gig. It's so true, though. As a musician, you're expected to have professional photos or headshots on hand, so you can give them to concert promoters for programs and publicity ads, or maybe it's for social media or for a website. You finally get round to booking a photographer or reining in a friend with a nice camera to take photos of you, and then what? How do you pose? Do you look at the camera? Or do you look forlornly out into the distance, perhaps wondering what series of events in your life has led you to this certain predicament? Are you going to be sultry and serious, or throw your head back in unbridled mirth? Where's it going to be? How about that distressed brick facade in the alleyway behind your flat? Or somewhere totally practical, such as the banks of the River Thames? Are you going to look casual and cool, or opt for the full-on ball gown or tuxedo affair? And, most importantly, what the hell are you going to do with your hands? Perhaps drape them seductively over your instrument, or cradle your face delicately with them to indicate that, as a musician, your hands are pertinent to your music making. I mean, no one does that with ears. Your ears are just as important. It's so hard. I feel like some people are more natural at this kind of thing than others. I once attended a photo shoot where I'll never forget the photographer kept saying, micro movements, it's all about the micro movements. So we all looked like we were swaying semi-consciously on the spot. But I suppose that's a good strategy if you're going to take 1,000 photos. I mean, 999 of them might be terrible, but then you might just get the one. Another time, a fixer didn't even ask me for a photo because they plucked a totally rando picture from my Facebook page to put on their website. And despite having loads of photos of me with, or in the vicinity of my cello, they chose a photo of me at a restaurant in Germany holding up an enormous pizza that I was about to eat. So who knows what people were looking for in a publicity photo? Clearly more pizza. I mean, you couldn't even see my hands. If you have an experience that Music College didn't prepare you for, then let me know at asitcomespodcast@gmail.com. Or send me a message on social media. Or tell me. That is your challenge. Find me. That's it for today. Special thanks to Roz Nagy for my logo and Daniel Elms for my jingle. Great big double bass sized thanks to Nina Harries for coming all the way to my place to chat and catch up. And finally, thank you for listening. Always lovely to hear from you, so drop me a line at asitcomespodcast@gmail.com. Like and follow the pod on Instabook and Facegram at asitcomespod. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, and spread the word. Chat to you soon. Bye. Oh, there's a dog barking in the background. Shut up, dog. Shut up, dog. Shut up, dog. Oh, we did. Okay.